You get used to a few things around here. You get used to being ignored, overruled, and hearing "Phewie" as a full sentence. But you never get used to someone disrupting the kitchen. It was Tuesday morning, past 10. Fritz was deep in the alchemy of preparing duck à l'orange, a dish Wolfe hadn't requested but dictated for dinner. I'd just returned from delivering a check to a particularly sour tax attorney on 38th Street when I stepped into the front hall and froze. Sister of them, neither Wolfe nor Fritz's drifted from the kitchen. One was high and pinched, the other low and clipped. A woman and a man arguing in hushed tones, but not quietly enough. I edged into the dining room, catching the tail of Fritz's white apron as he vanished into his sanctuary. Wolfe wasn't in his office. The voices grew clearer, coming from the kitchen itself. Now, I don't make a habit of meddling in Fritz's domain. He guards that space like a monk protecting a wine cellar. But this wasn't the usual clatter of pots or a murmured debate over time versus tarragon. This was trouble, and Wolfe, who'd sooner starve than eat restaurant food, would not take kindly to strangers near his cooktop. I stepped in. Kitchen was bright, warm, and heavy with the scent of orange zest and rendered duck fat. Fritz stood stiffly at the prep table, hands glistening with citrus. Across from him was a young woman in a plum wool coat, clutching a folded piece of paper, her face like she'd just scraped her way through a subway brawl. Beside her stood a tall man with sandy hair and a scar slicing diagonally across his chin, as if someone had swung a broken beer bottle and missed the vital bits. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my voice light but loaded. "Okay. But unless one of you is a Michelin inspector or has a personal invite from Nero Wolfe, I suggest you take your domestic mystery and get the hell out of our kitchen." The woman spun toward me, her hazel eyes wide and sharp with intelligence, and twitchy eye. "I'm sorry," she said, stepping back. "I didn't mean to intrude. I was told this was the only way to speak to Mr. Wolfe without being turned away." She glanced at the man, who didn't look at her but kept his eyes on the countertop, specifically a butcher block cutting board near the edge, which Fritz had nudged halfway aside as if he'd been interrupted mid-chop. "He doesn't take invited visitors," I said, "especially not through the kitchen. That's like entering a church." "Through the confessional, I left a note," she insisted, "last week with your secretary, Miss Kent, Lily Kent, our temp from the agency, while Long Cohen's niece was off having an appendix removed. She was efficient and bright but knew I, Adia, note to give her a refresher on who gets buzzed in and who doesn't. Mr. Wolfe hasn't responded." The woman continued, "But I need his help. I think someone's been in this house before that got my attention." "In this house?" She nodded and unfolded the paper. "No, not paper. Our cheapy card, stained at the edges. Pink fingerprints smudged across the bottom. It was Fritz's handwriting. I recognized the looping F, but the recipe was unfamiliar. Read duck l'orange. With Cointreau reduction note, do not store with the original blade secure beneath the board. "What the hell else?" I murmured, taking the card. Fritz looked stricken. He took it from my hand like it was a stolen Rembrandt. "I did not write this," he said. Stiffly, "It looks like mine, but Ida's not mine." The fee woman looked between us nervously. It was left in my coat pocket. 2 days ago at my apartment. I haven't been in this house since I was 10. That was enough mystery before noon. I ushered them both out of the kitchen and into the front room. Then I buzzed, Wolfe one buzz, urgent, not dangerous. Who? Won't appreciate it, but I didn't care. Something about that recipe card, and the way the guy with the scar hadn't spoken was needling my neck hairs. Wolfe's voice crackled over the intercom. "Archie, explain." I gave him the essentials. A woman named Cora Lang, former resident of this very house when it was a boarding house in the 90s. A fake recipert left in her coat. A man named Dax Fuller, who says he's her friend. Thought look he gave her. Said he preferred a leash and a single, unsettling sentence about the knife under the cutting board. There was a long pause. I waited. Fritz stood like a stone. Then Wolfe said, without inflection, "Bring them up." And just like that, Nero Wolfe took a case without a fee, a contract, or a proper breakfast, which meant two things. One, hell ready knew more than I did. And two, somebody maybe in this house had Pakiti, wrong bear with the wrong blade. If you've never watched Nero Wolfe react to strangers invading his personal space, you've missed one of life's more refined performances in controlled fury. Coral Lang and her shadow Dax Fuller followed me up the stairs to Wolfe's office, Fritz hovering behind them with the suspicious air of a man who's just caught someone polishing silver with oven grease. Cora moved like Semianetrin to be inconspicuous, but too nervous to pull it off. Dax Fuller did it bother. His eyes scanned everything, door frame, ceiling, corners, the Persian rug underfoot. I could already tell he didn't like the place. Wolfe sat behind his desk, a mountain in canary, yellow pajamas, and a brown dressing gown that looked like it had cost more than my car. His eyes didn't move from the open dictionary in front of him. He turned one page slowly with a single pink finger, then finally looked up. "You have intruded," he said. Cora opened her mouth, but he raised a hand, not fast, just enough to seize command of the room. "You trespassed up in me kitchen. You disrupted Mr. Goodwin," interrupted Fritz Breener in the midst of culinary preparations, "and introduced a document of unknown origin into my home." "Why? I'm sorry," Cora said. "I know it shouldn't have, but I didn't know what else to do. I've tried other Detective Esplas. Nobody takes me seriously. That may be because you are being unclear." Wolfe said precisely, "So you have one opportunity. Begin at the beginning, Mr. Goodwin. Take a chair. Fritz, bring coffee," I said. Fritz vanished. Cora stood in front of Wolfe's desk like a student caught cheating on a vocabulary test. "I grew up in this house," she said, "a long time ago, when it was still a boarding house." "Which?" Wolfe asked. 31. He nodded. "Continue." "My mother, Ellen Lang, rented a room here from 1994 to 1996. She was a secretary, single mother. I was 10. We stayed about 18 months. You recall this place, barely, only fragments. T stairs, the smell of furniture polish, a big man yelling about orchids. I never came back." Wolfe allowed himself a small grunt. "And now?" "Last week, I got a phone call. No name, just a voice, saying you lived at 918 West 35th Street. Something was left there. You're not safe." Wolfe folded his hands. "And you believed this?" "Not at first, but then I found a card in my coat pocket. Recipe I'd never seen before, in handwriting that looked familiar. I looked up the address, found out it was still owned privately. Found you. Hi." Thought she hesitated. "I thought maybe someone who used to live here hid something." "Something?" Wolfe echoed our Kingo brow. "I don't know. That's the problem. I don't know if it's a warning, a clue, or just someone playing games with my memory, but I didn't imagine the card." "You certainly didn't," I said. "I've seen Fritz's handwriting often enough to testify in court. It wasn't his, but it was close enough to be creepy." Wolfe turned to the man still standing silently in the corner. "And you, sir?" "Dax Fuller." He said, voice flat. "Private security, retained by Miss Lang." "No, I'm her cousin." "Interesting." Wolfe tapped his fingers. "And what is your opinion of this alleged threat?" "I've worked long enough in acid recovery to know a misdirection when I see one," Fuller said. "Somebody wants her to come back here. Whoever it is, they know where she lived, what she wore, and what pocket she'd reach into when she got home." Wolfe made a low sound in his throat. Fritz returned with coffee. He placed the tray down and, without looking at Cora or Fuller, retreated as if the conversation might curdle the cream. Wolfe leaned back. "Mr. Goodwin, sir, You will locate the other former boarders who resided here from 1994 to 1996. Cross-reference names with our deed and tax records. Then, if you must, consult all understood to Miss Lang. Have you told anyone else about this? No? I, Donovan, talked to most of my family. Wolfe nodded eyes. Closed very well, leave Deckard. With Mr. Goodwin, you may go. Cora blinked. Wait. That's it. You believe me? Wolfe's eyes opened slowly. I do not accept cases. I accept challenges. Yahav presented one. You may return tomorrow at 4 o'clock. She started to speak again, but I was already on my feet. This way. Miss Lang, Mr. Fuller. They followed me out. I closed the door behind them and gave Wolfe a look. You believe her? No, he said, but I believe something happened. In the card, I would very much like to know what was once stored under my cutting board and why someone once hurt her. Remembered. I walked him out, got Cora's number, and watched Fuller glare at the street like he expected it to pull a gun. As they left, something flickered behind Cora's cool exterior. She looked at the brownstone, not the way people usually do, not with curiosity or awe, but with recognition, the kind that tastes of blood and old wallpaper. Back inside, Fritz was waiting. Search the kitchen, he said tersely. Nothing under the board, nothing missing, not even a knife, nothing but the drawers, not as I left it this morning. You sure? He stiffened. Yes, that was all I needed. Back upstairs, I found Wolfe feeding his orchids. He didn't look up. ASI came in. What do you think? Okay. Ass. She was truthful in parts, lying in others. What about the card's origin? She did not find it in her coat. She's lying about how it came to her, and possibly when you think she planted it, not necessarily, but she knows more than she said. Mr. Fuller is not her cousin. He said he lied. His diction is military. He is not related by blood. That was not familial protection. It was contractual that stopped me. I considered Fuller's face, the practiced blankness of it, and the thing under the board. I have no idea, Wolfe admitted, which is precisely why I intend to find out. Finding people who's to live in a house that hasn't had a tenant since Clinton was in office is not what you'd call a one phone call job, but this wasn't my first round of ghost chasing, and I had some names, some luck, and a reliable guy named Saul Panzer to make the impossible seem like Tuesday brunch. After a little digging and a very persuasive call to the Department of Housing Records, which may have involved Eddie, fake mustache, and a story about asbestos, I had a short list of boarders from the mid-90s when Wolfe's brownstone briefly wore the mask of a shared residence. The situation, as Wolfe had answered described, with acid in its tone, had been an aberration of necessity, following Alago's spat. With the city over property taxes, the boarding arrangement lasted less than 2 years before Wolfe paid off debt and banished all tenants, never to allow another soul to sleep under his roof who didn't cook, clean, or conduct investigations. At his direction, by 3 o'clock, I had names and notes. Lyra Mims, then a live-in nurse, single, no kids, no Rita, lives in Queens. Gilbert Gilly Marks, then a failed playwright with 2 arrests for disorderly conduct, no reportedly teaching drama to high schoolers. In Yonkers, Wallace Reeve, then unemployed freelance antique. Vera Notice Appert off public record. After 2007, Ellen Lang, Cora's mother, died in 2012. Cause stroke, no criminal or civil record. Ava and Richard Vale, married couple, tech workers, divorced. In 1999, Richard deceased. Ava, now in DC, works in policy lobbying. It wasn't a bad start, considering the building was effectively screwed. From tenant memory, like a well-handled cover-up, I gave the list to Wolfe, who had returned to his desk and resumed, sulking over his violated cutting board like a man whose cellar had been defiled. He glanced at the list, grunted, and tapped two names with one finger. Miss Mims and Mr. Marks. Speak Totham, not Reeve. His absence is more valuable than his presence. 4. Now, Southites, how I found myself driving to Queens in a borrowed car that smelled faintly of mint gum, and tragedy knocking on the door of a garden apartment that hadn't seen a new paint job since Dialupleora Mims opened the door with an expression that hovered between suspicion and amusement. 72 alert eyes, hair dyed a shade of auburn that belonged to a younger decade, and a cardigan that had seen at least 3 presidents. Yes, Miss Mims, my name is Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe. That was usually enough togging me inside, or at least onto a porch. This time it worked better than expected though. My God, that man's still alive, she asked, stepping back. Come in, said. You want a scone? I made a whole tray. I declined the scone, but accepted the chair. The apartment smelt like vanilla and old dust. You lived at 918 West 35th. From 1994 to 1996, I said. What do you remember? Everything she said. Crisply, I only left back house. I got a better offer in the Hamptons, and Wolfe made it clear he didn't like tenants. Not that he ever spoke to us. He just glared from a distance, like a very disappointed LeBron. Do you remember a little girl, Cora Lang? She blinked, nodded. Yes, sweet kid, kept to herself. Mother was a piece of work though. What do you mean, secretive? She'd vanish 4 nights at a time. Cora would be with the sitter, or some madams. She'd knock on my door, crying. I didn't pry, but Ellen was, let's say, not entirely legal in her employment. Drugs, I don't know, she never brought anything obvious into the house, but there were loud arguments on the stairs once I found a rolled wad of cash under the mailbox with someone else's name on it. Did you keep it? I'm a nurse, she said with a frown. No, I put it back. It was gone by morning. I locked it away. Do you recall anything unusual ever being stored in the kitchen? Under the counter, hidden. She hesitated. There was an incident, she said. I don't know if this is what you're looking for. One night, I couldn't sleep. I went down to make tea. Fritz was already in the kitchen, looked furious. He was kneeling by the spice drawer. Spice drawer, yes, said someone had moved his things. He was talking to himself, angry. Heard him say, if it happens again, I'll leave your shirt. It's positive. I never saw him that upset again. I thanked her, took the address, offered Cat's veterinarian for no particular reason, and headed out too. Yonkers, where Gilly Marks taught improv to children whose parents had clearly given up on college ambitions. Marks answered the door in a faded Yale hoodie and cargo shorts, mid-50s, tired eyes, breath like reheated gin. He wasn't surprised to see me. He was delighted. Nero Wolfe, still alive, he croaked. I thought that old Buzzard Woodhave died mid-past. He's in excellent health, thank you. Well, come in. Tell him Isdol owe him for keeping the rats out of the cellar. Did he ever install that dumb waiter? No, he offered me a beer which I declined. The apartment looked like a set from Waiting for Godot if the props were all Craigslist rejects you'll remember. Ellen Lang, oh yeah, real fox, smoked too much, never talked to anyone her kid, was always with her quiet little thing. What happened to her? She's the reason I'm here. I gave him the story. Steekert, the house, the odd intrusion. He laughed. Sounds like someone's trying to dig up the past. That's the working theory. You recall anything going missing? Good in the kitchen? He leaned back. Kitchen was off limits. Fritz ran it like a Swiss prison. Once I tried to microwave something in the middle of the night. Fritz heard it from his bedroom and banned me from the fridge for a week. But did anything ever happen? Samiana tempering, his mood changed subtly. A pause, a finger tapped on the side of his beer can. Once he said, someone broke in. Wolfe said it was a burglar, but nothing was stolen, nothing, except a carving knife. One of Fritz's best, Just disappeared, reported hell no. Wolfe doesn't report anything to the cops, said it was handled internally. I let that sink in. Mark squinted at me. What's really going on? We're not sure yet, I said, but someone wants Cora Lang to come back, and they want her to remember something hidden in that house. His face went pale. You think this has to do with Ellen we're trying to find out back at the Brownstone? I laid it out. For Wolfe Mims's story about Fritz's near mutiny Marksdale of the missing knife. The alleged break-in, the strangely protective silence around Ellen Lang Wolfe steepled his fingers. Someone wanted something removed from this house, he said, and it was. Done quietly, no police, no reports, only memory remains, and now that memory is being deliberately reawakened. I nodded, and Cora Lang is the key. Head up the finger once on the desk, then we must find out what she was made to forget. By now, we had two confirmed weird memories, one missing knife and a very large man in a very expensive chair who had begun making faint humming noises while rereading. 18-year-old case Velasquez, though they might contain prophecy. Wolfe hadn't declared the case substantial yet, which is usually his equivalent of a standing ovation, but he had asked Fritz for cold roast beef instead of warm trout at lunch, and that, for him, was a sign of focused discomfort. My job was clear: dig deeper, and if possible, get someone to say the wrong thing at the right time. First on my list was Ava Vale, the former Cohen turned DC policy lobbyist. Getting her on the phone had taken 3 calls. Quantum was dropped, and a mention of a matter connected to your former husband that cracked the ice. I haven't thought about that house in over 20 years, she said, her voice like polished shed silver. It was a strange place, quiet, unnaturally quiet. What do you remember about Ellen Lang? Kay? Pause. Reserved. She had secrets. I think I once heard her arguing with someone in the hallway very late at night. Man, I asked Richard about it afterward, and he said she was trouble, waiting to ignite. Key had a talent for drama. Did you agree? No? I thought she was fragile, like something that had been shattered and put back together, but not quite right. What about Cora? A ghost of a girl she looked like knew too much and was never allowed to say any of it. I was getting a consistent picture. I let her talk, morassed about her former husband's death. She said it had been an accident, carbon monoxide leak in a rental cabin upstate. Tragic. Isolated. I made a note, then I asked about the kitchen. You mean the sanctum? She laughed. No one went in there except Fritz. You'd have an easier time sneaking into thought knocks with a crowbar than past that man with a soup spoon. Still, I pressed. Do you ever hear of anything going missing? Knife note, something stashed and then removed? She went silent. Then one night, this would have been winter, maybe 95, some neck knocked on our door. It was Wolfe in person. He asked Richard to come downstairs, wouldn't say why did he go. Yes, came back 20 minutes later, white as chalk, never said a word about it. The next morning, he told me we'd be moving out by spring. I whistled. Any idea what it was about? None. Wolfe was furious. The kind of fury that doesn't shout, it chills another piece on the board. If Wolfe had intervened personally, something had gotten under his skin, and that didn't happen unless his house, his routine, or his sense of order had been offended in biblical fashion. After I hung up with Ava, I made a decision. There was one person I needed to confront directly. Cora Lang. She'd given me a temporary address in Airbnb near Madison, supposedly for the duration of this consultation, as she put it in her carefully rehearsed tone. I didn't believe for a second it was a casual setup. I found her in a studio apartment, above a used bookstore, still in the plum coat, sitting at a tiny round table, drinking chamomile tea like she was in the waiting room of a therapist. She couldn't afford. You came fast, she said. I run errands for Genius Speed. It's part of the service. She gave a twitch of a smile, but it didn't land too much tension in her hands, coiled around the mug. I talked to some of the Fermertnits, I said. They all seem to remember you and your mother. She looked down. I didn't think they would. They also remembered things, missing knives, notes, secret arguments, and they remember your mother as someone who carried danger in her purse. Still, nothing, Cora, I said quietly. We need to stop playing. Memory games? That card didn't just appear in your coat. Someone's trying to stir something. And you're cooperating. Why? She didn't look up. Because I don't know what I'm trying to remember. Only that something happened in that kitchen. Something I saw. Or heard, and it's been coming back in pieces. Try me. I remember standing in the doorways, said slowly. The light was on. Fritz wasn't there. There was a man, tall, dyed angry. He was holding a knife, not waving it, just holding it. When was this? I don't now. But I remembered the tile floor and my mother's voice whispering like she didn't want me to hear, but knew I would. What was she saying? She said, "Don't do it here. It's too close." I sat back. You didn't tell Wolfe this? No, why not? Because I don't want to know what they were talking about. If I say it out loud, it becomes real. That was the closest to a confession I was going to get. I thanked her and left as I hit that street. Shape moved to buildings down, a man leaning against a mailbox, pretending to look at his phone. Dax Fuller. I strolled over Fancy, running into you. He didn't even blink. You're following me now? I could ask the same. I don't answer to you, Mr. Goodwin, no. But if you're going to lurk like a Ben movie assassin, maybe take off the Bluetooth earpiece. You're not fooling anyone, headed, and walked away. I didn't follow. He wasn't the threat. At least not the first one in line. Back at the brownstone I laid. It out. Wolfe listened to steepled hummed. Once she lied again, he said after a moment. But this time, less. What part, man with the knife? She remembers more than she claims. She has not yet revealed the object in question. You'll think it's still in the house. No, Wolfe said. I think it left with Ellen laying booty. Think the knowledge of it, the idea remains, and someone wants it buried permanently. I nodded slowly. Think what's the next move? He closed his eyes. We must uncover. Who knew what then, and Wolfe fears it. Now then, he opened his eyes. Tomorrow we speak with Saul Udanthave, to believe in ghosts, to know when something's wrong in the brownstone. Doesn't rattle chains or whisper from the air vents. What it does is move the salt. Fritz is as close. 2 compulsive A's. Man can be without needing clinical evaluation. Every drawer, every spice jar, every carving fork is placed with the spatial precision of a diamond cutter. So when I found the bay leaves, nudged to and left, in the sea salt jar with its lid asquith, didn't need to sniff for sulfur or call the Vatican. Something had been tampered with. I'd come down just past 10, hoping to snag a cup of coffee, while Wolfe was deep in orchid meditation. The kitchen was empty, but warm, and everything looked right until it didn't. I checked the drawer where Fritz kept his smaller blades, the paring knives, the delicate boning knife with a custom wood handle Wolfe had imported from France. The drawer itself was unlocked as usual, but felt liner was slightly bunched, like someone had reached in without smoothing it after. I didn't touch anything, just backed out, slowly grabbed a pad from the pantry shelf and scribbled the words knife drawer. Then I marched it upstairs, like a kid handing in his overdue homework. Wolfe took one look, didn't speak, and pressed the intercom. Fritz. A moment later, our chef appeared in the doorway like a man expecting sentence. Check your tools, Wolfe, said everything. Fritz disappointed. Wolfe looked at me. Well, it wasn't like yesterday. I said whoever was in the kitchen last night or early this morning wasn't rummaging. They were checking, deliberate, gentle, looking for something. Wolfe closed his eyes, or checking to see if it's still here. My brain pinged the item. One of Cora's memory is dancing around. He opened his eyes. Yes, which strongly suggests someone believes it was hidden here. and may yet remain. You think it was a knife. I think Wolfe said slowly that a knife was a tool, not the treasure. Fritz returned face. Pale, nothing missing, but the cleaver is scratched, the surface scratched and near. The base, it was not like that yesterday. Goff nodded once. Archizement. Mr. Panzer, Saul Panzer, is not flashy. He doesn't carry brass knuckles. Use a magnifying glass. He looks like a man who'd sell you insurance badly. Beautif, you wanted to know what someone ate for breakfast last Thursday, or whether the man claiming to be your cousin, ex KGB, Saul, could find out in a day and leave you an invoice written on the back of your dry cleaning receipt. He showed up at 2 that afternoon, nodded once at Fritz, once at me, and once at Fit. Wolfe, in thought, order. Wolfe wasted no time, Mr. Panzer. We have a situation involving an intrusion. Twice now, someone has entered our kitchen suddenly, disturbed specific objects, and left no trace of forced entry. We believe the motive relates to an item allegedly hidden here some 29 years ago. Saul nodded again. Unsurprised, Wolfe handed him the file I'd copied on the former tenants. Observed the movements of Miss Coral Lane and Mr. Dax Fullerendonly, confirmed their association, and looked for links to any of the others on this list, especially Wallace Reeve. Hayhouse, not surfaced, and that is suspicious. Got it. Report directly to Mr. Goodwin. Saul rose. Give me 36 hours. He left without another word. I turned to Wolfe, worried. It's Cora. I'm concerned she's being used, Wolfe said. Or perhaps is complicit. She remembers too much and reveals too little. Han Fuller is lying. He was not merely watching her. Yesterday, he was watching you. That little revelation hit with the grace of a brick through glass. So, I'm a target. You're bait, Wolfe said. They want to know how much we know, and whether the house still holds anything of value. I mulled that over. Should. I'll wear a Bellenly if it helps you think. That night, I stayed up, not in the front room, where Wolfe could hear me pacing, but downstairs in the kitchen, seated in the dark with a thermos and a 32 under the counter. Fritz was not pleased when I told him. Beautified, some whispered persuasion, and a promise not to touch a single copper pot. He let me plant myself like a detective with insomnia. The house was still. Even the radiator had the decency to hold its breath just after 3 o'clock a.m. A soft creak, not from the kitchen door. This came from service stairs behind the pantry, which hadn't been used since Fritz installed an herb shelf where the entrance used to be. I stood silently. The noise came again, not footsteps, a subtle shifting, like someone lifting a panel. Tinselance. I moved slowly. No flashlight, no bravado. Round the counter, toward the pantry. The air had changed just slightly, the kind of stillness that follows heat there. On the far side of the spice rack, a small piece of paper folded, tucked under the jar of marjoram. I took and folded it inside, written in careful block print. Don't dig, not yours. No Namino date, no smudges, just a message. I went back upstairs and slept with the note in me. Sock Wolfe read it the next morning with no visible reaction. Fritz made ex-Florentine and said nothing at 10:15. The phone rang. I picked it up. Goodwin. Sago. Something. I motioned to Wolfe and put it on speaker. Fuller is not her cousin, Sa said. He's former private military. Left a corporate security firm in Chicago last month under a cylinder arbitration agreement. Guess why? Something with surveillance? I asked close. He was caught falsifying entries on an internal log, trying to cover the movement of restricted items out of a secure site. Lovely, I said. And what about Cora? She's clean mostly, but she has a sealed juvenile record from 1997. Something happened when she was 12, he explained. And this is where it gets interesting. Her mother was questioned that same year in connection to a missing persons case. I froze. Wallace Reeve. The name hung there. Wolfe's voice, soft and surefire. The file We must know what became of Mr. Reeve. I'll call in a favor. Give me time. Click. I looked at Wolfe. You think Reeves the reason for the note? I think Reeve is the object. I stared. You think he was what killed hidden in the house? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. But someone feared he might be, and someone else fears the truth. We'll prove it if you're waiting for a mystery to break wide open like Anna Verite Peach. You've never worked for Nero Wolfe Mysteries, according to Hemmed and Break. Tear, peeled layer by exasperating layer. And this one had skin like an armored cantaloupe. The next morning, I was halfway through airport on Cora's sealed juvenile record, mostly just notes and angry question marks, when Saul Panzer walked in and announced, "K." He nodded at me, nodded at Wolfe, and placed a manila folder on the desk like it contained a smoking gun. Wolfe motioned. I opened it, courtesy of a judge in Syracuse who owed me a favor, so said that sealed file. I read it, the short A version, in November 1997. Ellen Lang reported her daughter missing. For a 6-hour window, Cora was found hiding under a neighbor's porch. She said she was scared. I murmured, scanning. Said she'd seen a man with blood on his shirt in the kitchen. Sighs, didn't blink. Saul continued. The man was never identified. Ellen claimed it was a nightmare, and the girl recanted the next day. No charges filed, but 2 months later, Wallace Reeve disappeared. Same year, I said. Same week. Saul corrected that. Hit the air like a dropped wrench. Wolfe closed his eyes. Azure sign. His mind was moving faster than the rest of us could keep up. Terrace. Saul said Reeves' last known job was as a broker for off-theory estate items. He ran appraisals, owned and claimed valuables, usually posthumous cases with poor documentation. But in '96, started working under the table for a collector named Grant Velum Chabi, acquiring historically significant blades. Wolfe opened his eyes. Blade snips, sabers, bayonets, anything with provenance and a death toll. He was obsessed. Once paid 6 figures for Agneth that allegedly belonged to Jesse James. You're suggesting, I said, Reeve smuggled something into the brownstone, more likely through it, Saul said. If he was storing or transporting value weapons, he needed inconspicuous drop sites. He had a key to brownstone briefly. Wolfe's lease agreement included a clause about temporary absence. Reeve used that window to access the kitchen once, maybe twice, when Fritz was on vacation. Wolfe let out a low grunt. Not quite a foy, but close. He houses something here, Wolfe said. Not permanently, temporarily. And he told Ellen Lang. I finished Saul's thought, and Ellen told Cora not to remember, which made the Carter breadcrumb a psychological match flare designed to reignite a memory buried under decades of avoidance. Wolfe turned to Saul. Where's Mr. Velum? Dead 2006. Heart attack, but his estate was picked over, and a few items were unaccounted for, rumored to include a 19th century surgical blade used in a Civil War field hospital, one of a kind, vanished too. Valuable to discard, Wolfe murmured, too dangerous to sell without cover. A blade that vanished a tenant who vanished a girl with a fragmented memory. The threads were knotting. I spent theorist of the day tracking down one last name, Detective Rohr, the original investorado from the 1997 missing persons report on Wallace Reeve. He was retired, now living somewhere near Albany after 2 voicemails and a call to his niece. He agreed to talk on one condition: on recorders, he said, and no names in the papers. You have my word, I said, notebook ready. We met at a diner near Pipsy, where the coffee was bad and the bacon was worse. Rohr looked like a man who had been born suspicious and only got more so. I remember. The girl, he said, Cora, skittish, smart, saw something she wasn't so passetto. You think she was telling the truth? She was terrified, not confused, not inventing. Her mother shut it down hard. Told me if I didn't back off, she'd take legal action, and Reeve Rock leaned in. Nobody wanted to touch it. Reeve was small time, sure, but he had clients. Clients with deep pockets and long shadows nipped at it, want to poke that nest. No body, no blood trail. No crime, but you think Hugh was killed. I know he was. I just couldn't prove it. And Wolfe, he chuckled, estimatably, said there had been a tenant by that name, but no contact. Sincerely, 9-6. Said the man left no belongings and owed no rent. Do you believe him? Roy stirred his coffee, shrugged. I believe. Wolfe doesn't let anything happen in his house without knowing it. If something went down, he either didn't know or he chose not to. I got back to their brownstone. 8. The lights were dimmed, the kitchen empty. Wolfe was waiting in his square, a small yellow notebook open on his lap. I gave him the rock report. He read silently for 5 minutes, then closed the notebook. We're nearly there, he said. Where? Exactly to the motive, which is not murder, Wolfe said. Eraser. I blinked. Someone wants Cora's memory deleted. Wolfe explained they want the house free of any remaining connection to Reeves' disappearance. Card was baked, but not fur for me. You think they wanted you involved? Of course, if I declared there was nothing of note hidden here, no blade, no evidence, the matter dies. That's a hell of a gamble. Wolfe nodded. One someone has been planning for years. He turned his head toward the hallway. Tomorrow, invite all of them, Cora, Fuller, Miss Mims, Mr. Marks, Ava Vale. If she will travel, we will have our confrontation. And Semenya, said, eyes narrowing, will tell me why I was used. Nero Wolfe never enters a confrontation. He arranges one by noon the next day. The brownstone was unoccupied territory. We had 5 guests, 3 trays of canapes Fritz, prepared under silent protest, and one increasingly agitated security consultant leaning against the radiator like it owed him money. Coral Lang arrived first, jittery, overdressed, potato Fritz in the kitchen, invisibly flinching when he didn't reply. Next came Jilly Marks, who greeted me with a theatrical wink and a muttered deja vu. Then Miss Mims, arriving with the stride of someone showing up to a funeral just to be seen. Ava Vale came straight from the airport, wheeled luggage in tow and an air of caffeinated irritation. Dax Fuller brought up the rear, punctual and silent, pretending not to scan the exits. The office was ready, chairs arranged in a loose horseshoe-facing Wolfe's desk, like nervous worshippers at a silent. Masvolf hadn't moved since breakfast. When I ushered in the last of them, he looked up. Good afternoon. You are all here because of a lie. Some of you told it. One of you orchestrated it. I didn't say a word. Either did anyone else. Wolfe allowed to silence. 2 steep like overbrewed tea theory concerns a man named Wallace Reeve, he continued. A blade of historic valiant, a memory deliberately buried in a child's mind. That child is now a woman, Miss Lang, and she has been manipulated into revisiting this house under the pretense of seeking protection. She was, in fact, bait the trap. However, his mind Mark snorted. So this is theater. I came for answers. Wolfe stared him down. You came to ensure none of us remember what you did 28 years ago. Shall I continue, Marks? Shifted. Cora looked at him in shock. Wolfe gestured slightly, and I handed him the note. Don't dig. Not yours, this. Slept in my kitchen 3 nights ago. A warning or a plea. The author, Mentor, remind us that what's buried should stay buried, but the truth has a persistent stench. Ava Vale crossed her legs. Mr. Wolfe, I've been cooperative, but I'd like to know what exactly. I being guest of you. Nothing yet. Wolfe, said Butcher's husband, was visited by me in 1996 when he attempted to sell an item left in my kitchen, a knife of considerable value. He claimed it was a family heirloom. I knew he was lying. I demanded his removal. He complied. Shortly thereafter, he and you moved out. Her lips tightened, but she said nothing. Wolfe turned to Miss Mims. You witnessed an argument in the kitchen, for it's disturbed. Something moved you. Did note reported. I didn't think it was criminal, she said quietly, because it wasn't yet. He looked at Cora. You saw the knife. You heard your mother. You remember more than you admit. Cora looked pale. I was a kid. Children remember vividly, Wolfe said. You said. She whispered, don't do it here. It's too close. That was not fear of you being hurt. That was fear of you witnessing something. Danny Wolfe tapped the desk once Wallace Reeve disappeared in 1997. No remains, no charges, but 2 months earlier, your mother was seen arguing with him in this house. Reeve had been smuggling weapons, historic valuables in the brownstone as a temporary drop. One of them went missing. I believe your mother kept it. Cora gasped. No, she feared him. Wolfe sedaned. She knew what that blade was worth to collectors and to men like Reeve. Believe she struck him or aided someone who did. Either way, he vanished and Cheslensed. Hugh. Cora was trembling now. Fuller stood, but Wolfe barked, sit. Fuller, the jaw tight. Wolfe turned to him. You're not her cousin. You're private security hired to retrieve the blade, or at least confirm it was never recovered. Your employer is one of Reeve's former clients. Silence. Fuller didn't speak, but he didn't deny it. Wolfe pressed. You knew she'd seek me out. You encouraged it. You hoped I would declare nothing remained here, that her memory was flawed, but you weren't sure, so you searched quietly. Twice. Fuller's face was stone. And when I didn't react immediately, Wolfe said, you escalated. Q planted the card. You waited. I watched Cora look at Fuller now as if she'd never seen him. You lied to me. She said she had to know. Fuller said evenly. You had to remember Cora. Someone had to. If the knife was still here, if she hid it in the house, someone was bound to find it eventually. It's better come back clean. That's what this is about. Cora stood, now hands clenched. My mother may have killed someone Andy are worried about. Who owns a knife? No, Wolfe said. He's worried someone will prove he already recovered it and sold it. That landed like a shot. Full of flinch. That's absurd. Is it? Wolfe said mildly. Because Reeve's collector died in 2006. His estate inventory noted several missing items, but one surfaced 5 years ago in Berlin. Civil War surgical platinum cellar sold through a private auction firm in Prague. Wolfe reached to his side drawer, pulled a single envelope and placed it on the desk. I had saw trace it. The transaction came through a shell company with a Delaware address here. Last employer used the same legal firm to set up their shell accounts. We have enough to start an inquiry. Fuller stood. You can't prove. No, Wolfe agreed, but you can't disprove it, okay? And Miss Lang can't press charges for fraud, coercion, and harassment, and I can make the noise loud enough to wake the dead. The room went still. Then Fuller said, very quietly, what do you want? Wolfe looked at Cora. I want Miss Lang to know the truth, that her memory was accurate, that her silence was coerced, that her past, however painful, does not belong to scavengers. He turned back to Fuller. You will sign a confession, not criminal, but civil, admitting to misleading Miss Lang and planting the recipe card. You will forfeit any future claim to the Reeve blade should it be found, and you will leave this city. Fuller stared, his face blank. Then he nodded. Cora sank into her chair. Marks cleared his throat. So overdone. Wolfe said nothing, just turned his head to me. I opened the door. They left one by one. No one spoke. There's a moment that always comes after a Wolfe room, clearing, the kind of silence that feels not relieved, but rearranged, like a furniture of someone's life has been quietly moved while they were out getting groceries. After Fuller signed the statement, Wolfe dictated neat block print, initialed on every corner like it might try to sneak out. He left the brownstone without a word. No fight, no second glance at Cora, just gone. That kind of exit isn't surrender, it's strategy. The man would resurface somewhere under a different name, in a different city, hunting a different artifact, but not here. Wolfe had sealed that door tight. Cora didn't leave right away. She stayed seated while Wolfe returned to his orchids, her hands folded like Samia naturing to hold on to warmth after a long illness. I waited in the office doorway, watching her eyes sweep the room like they were memorizing something I don't. Now, if I wanted to remember, she said quietly. But I needed to know I wasn't crazy. Wolfe didn't turn around. Sanity is so very the truth is the only tonic. Cora stood. She left her number on Wolfe's desk, a small, square scrap torn from her notebook, and asked if she might call again someday. "It's not about murder or mushrooms," I said. "He'll consider it." She smiled brief real, then walked out. That should have been the end of it, but Wolfe wasn't satisfied. He called me back into the office half an hour later and told me to call the rest of them. Keys, Mims, Marks, and Ava Vale. Tell them we were finishing the case. He wanted them in the office again tonight. One final gathering. You've already confronted them. I said, what else is left? I asked questions. Wolfe said, now I will answer one that was Wolfe Athy's most ominous. They arrived grudgingly. Mims wore the same purple scarf she had at the first meeting, which I took as a sign of superstition. Gilly Marks brought a thermos full of what smelled like cheap gin and worse memories. Ava Vale wore a charcoal pantsuit, sharp enough to cut glass, and announced at the door she'd booked a train home for midnight. Let's keep it crisp, she said. They said what they had before. Fritz brought no canopes. Wolfe leaned forward. I thank you for returning. I will speak plainly. The room held still. Wallace Reeve did not die in this house. He died shortly after leaving it, but his disappearance was aided, perhaps initially, by at least 2 people in this room. One of you. Mr. Marks facilitated his access to the brownstone, likely through a forged maintenance contract. Marks flinched, but didn't speak. Wolfe continued. Reeves stored a weapon here. It was removed under duress or agreement by Ellen Legg. She did not sell it. She kept it. She feared what each represented, and when she realized others were looking for it, she destroyed it. Kay raised an eyebrow. How do you know? Because someone else tried to recover it, Mr. Fuller. He failed because it no longer exists, but he hoped I would say so publicly, giving him cover to explain its absence without admitting guilt. Mims looked between them. So what does this have to do with us Wolves? Tone Cooldew were all involved in a web of silence. Miss Mims, you heard things and reported none of them. Mr. Marks, you facilitated Reeves' entrance. Mrs. Vale, your husband attempted to sell the blade once before. You may not have known at the time, but you do now. Ava's voice was ice. Are you accusing me of conspiracy, Mr. Wolfe? No, Wolfe said. I'm accusing all of you of cowardice that stunned the room. You feared scandal, lost shame, so you watched a girl lose her grasp on Memoriand, allowed a mystery to become a wound no longer. He tapped a finger on his desk. I will be writing a letter to the HYPD detailing the Reeve connection, the failed investigation, and the recent manipulation of Miss Lang. I will include the confession signed by Mr. Fuller. Mark slawed bitterly. And what's the point? He's dead. The blade's gone. There's nobody. The point, Wolfe said, is that truth is not measured by its ability to punish it. It's measured by its refusal to be buried. No one spoke. The room had the feel of an attic being aired after years of dust. Wolfe nodded once, then turned his chair back toward the orchids. You may go. They left slower this time. Miss Mims said nothing as she passed me. Marks gave acquiescence. Sorry, Archie, like I'd been a casualty of some long war. He hadn't won. Ava paused in the front hall. She looked over her shoulder at Wolfe's closed door. He's wrong, you know, she said. How's that? Truth isn't a tonic. It's a scalpel. It cuts clean, but it always leaves a scar. I didn't argue. She left later that night. Fritz made Vepicata and opened a bottle of Barber without being asked. That alone told me the case had wormed its way under his skin too. Wolfe took his time with dinner. He ate in silence, then retired to the office with his usual beer and a copy of L'Art Voodoo Van de France. I followed with 2 tumblers and a question. What made you change course? I asked. What made you go van back? He didn't look up from the magazine. I was unsatisfied, he said too. Much remained. Implicit silence is a corrosive thing, Archie. It erodes his not only memory, but meaning. You wanted them to hear it from you. You wanted them to know what they'd allowed to happen, not merely suspected. No, it's heaven if there's no arrest, no justice. There is always justice, Wolfe said. It simply wears many coats today. It wore shame. He sipped his beer. I waited, thinking that might be the end. Then Wolfe added, almost as an afterthought. Also, I dislike being used. It took 3 days for the dust to settle, and that's being generous. Wolfe didn't speak of the case again, not directly anyway. He didn't need to. For him, the act of naming the thing, dragging it out into the parlor like a threadbare rug, and showing everyone just how many feet had scuffed. It was the point. Once exposed, it lost its power. The rest was just residue, but for the rest of us, there were pieces to pick up. Coraline called the next afternoon. I took the call. I just wanted to say thank you, said. I know it wasn't a pleasant job. No, said, but it was a necessary one, you remember. More now. Not everything just flashes the hallway, my mother cried. Estelle, don't know what she did, or why I didn't answer right away. Damn, I said. Maybe you're not supposed to. Maybe the only thing you needed to recover was the fact that something was hidden. You were right, not to let it stay buried. She paused. You think she killed him? No, I said. I think she kept him out, maybe locked him out of the kitchen. Maybe she stopped him from doing something worse. Maybe she didn't save his life, but she might have saved yours. That landed. Cheeks held. You think Wolfe would ever speak to me again if you bring a good Alsatian Riesling and don't rearrange the kitchen chairs? You might be surprised, she laughed softly. I hung up after promising to keep her updated. If anything new came up, it would not from us. That evening, Saul dropped off a file. Fuller was gone, resigned from his contract security firm, last seen boarding a flight to S. Paulo under a different name, Diego F. O'Malley O'Fell. Things Wolfe didn't even grunt. Just placed the folder in the bottom drawer and turned the page of his bookmarks. Sent a postcard, one of those gaudy novelty ones with a Statue of Liberty dressed in drag. It read to Wolfe with reluctant transpect, to Archie with reluctant fondness. I'm going sober, maybe. I pinned it to the wall next to the radiator. Fritz disapproved. Mims never called. Eva Vell sent an email to her, polite and legally sent it. She thanked Wolfe for his uncompromising pursuit of inconvenient truths, which I translated as Junburst. Key, me, but I'm not going to sue life, resumed. The orchids thrived. Fritz went back to experimenting with duck confit. Wolfe returned to glaring at politics in the Gazette, but there was Asmal shift I couldn't unsee. He lingered longer in the kitchen now, not in the way of a man guarding his turf, but like someone revisiting a place he'd been too proud to examine. One morning, I found him running a finger along the butcher block counter, not inspecting, not fussing, just saying it. Something bothering you? I asked. He didn't look up. Not anymore. He turned and left so naturally. I had to know later that week, while Fritz was out art-stocking Armagnac, I pulled up the old house ledger Wolfe kept in the safe. He hadn't looked at it in years. It was from that odd period, 1994 to 1996, when Anance came and went like summer storms. His notations were brief names, payment status, a few personal impressions. In shorthand, Reeves' entry was their W. Reeve broker, for be paid in cash, no complaint. But under Ellen Lang's, there was something I hadn't noticed before. Just P, single phrase, added in Wolfe's distinct script after she'd moved out. Knew more than she said. left with less than she brought. It didn't explain Thieblade. It didn't accuse, but it told me something. Wolfe had suspected her from the beginning, but he hadn't pressed it, either because there was not proof, or because even Wolfe knew when to let something remain unsaid. The following Sunday, Wolfe invited me to dinner. Not unusual, but this time he let him pick the wine that was unusual. I chose something. From Northern Italian mint, tier modest. He sniffed it, declared it sufficient, and proceeded to drink the entire bottle with his castle. Halfway through the second course, he said, "You handled yourself well, thank you. You made assumptions, but they were reasonable. You exercised restraint. Were you worried I wouldn't?" He grunted. "You have on occasion pursed satisfaction over solution?" "Well," I said, "I work for a man who rarely serves either." Wolfe lifted his glass. This case was not about proof. It was about presence. Memory is a kind of evidence. I considered that. You think Fuller will stay gone. He will not return to this city. That is sufficient. What about Thieblade? He wiped his mouth. Destroyed long ago. Ellen Lang was clever than most. She knew its presence. Endangered her child. A mother who sees clearly is more dangerous than a man with a weapon. I thought might be the closest Wolfe would ever come to calling Somione heroic by the time Fritz brought out the cheese plate. Wolfe had gone quiet. Not his brooding quiet. His finished with the matter quiet. I poured myself a second glass. I said, "I always thought the kitchen was untouchable, like holy grounded," was he said, until someone bled in it. We sat for a moment in that sentence. Then Wolfe added, "Now, it is sacred for a different reason, and not of forgiveness. No truth, it lingered heroically, sent till it was recognized." He reached for the blue cheese delicate Asa jeweler, choosing a diamond, and that was the end of it. It's been weeks now, when the brownstone is back to its baseline. Orderly, quiet, simmering with subtext. Wolfe reads, Fritz simmers. I answer phones and chase people who lead professionally. Every now and then, I think about that recipe card. I still have it tucked in the bottom drawer off my desk. I don't know if it was Fuller who wrote it, or Cora, or someone else entirely. Maybe it was never meant to lead to a blade. Maybe it was always meant to lead to the truth behind it. Doesn't matter. What matters is that Wolfe was not in court, not on paper, but in the only way that counts in his world, with clarity, with words, and of course, with dinner served hot and silence restored a week after the case closed. Closed in our way, not the legal kind. Wolfe dictated a letter that wasn't unusual. Wolfe writes more letters than some attorneys file motions. They go to editors, judges, vendors, academics, and on rare and infuriating occasions to me. But this one was different. He didn't use the typewriter, didn't even ask me to take dictation. He sat down in the office of care with a fountain pen and wrote the whole thing himself, slowly, carefully, inked. Good paper, cream-colored, thick enough to build a dam. I asked once what was a statement. He said nothing more. The letter was addressed to the Commissioner of Police with a CC to the Chief Archivist of the Municipal Cold Case Division. I saw the first page before he sealed it. Simple, declared of Vepros, no adornments, he wrote. This house was once a site of storage for an object of high value and low morality. That object, whether weapon or symbol, was removed before it could be misused. One person disappeared. Others conspired to forget. I, however, remembered that was it. No names, no dates, no confessions or conclusions, just Wolfe adding his weight to a long-forgotten event, declaring it real, and more importantly knowing he sent it with his usual embossed stationariant. A delivery receipt, won't that draw heat? I asked, I invited. Wolfe said, let them come. It will remind them that some things, even unprovable, are worth acknowledging. I let it go. You don't argue with a man who chooses his words like an executioner chooses blades. Like it. No response. Of course, we didn't. That was the whole point. The truth is, Wolfe didn't solve a murder this time. There was no corpse, no bullet, no blood. Trail just echoes, just a soft scrape of a girl's memory and a weapon that passed through the brownstone like a ghost. But Wolfe clarified something, and for him, that's more sacred than solving. Me, I like a good collar. I like knowing someone's going to sit in a cell for a few decades. I like evidence, fingerprint scenes you can point at in court, but even I know there are crimes you don't prosecute. They just hang around your shoulders until someone stares them down. And Wolfe stared. I watched it. Happen in the kitchen, went back to normal. Fritz stopped treating the spice drawer like a crime scene. The missing cleaver never turned up, and neither of us asked again if I'd have been part of the original mess. The weapon Reeve wanted, or the one he ferreted, was gone. We even replaced the cutting board. Fritz insisted on a new one, walnut with a branded W burned into the side for good measure. I didn't ask if that was his idea or Wolfe's. Maybe it didn't matter. Sometimes the tools change back to the memories demanded, but Wolfe hasn't used it yet. He still prefers the old board with its faint scars, and history says it's better for precision. One morning, I asked him if he thought Ellen Lang had gotten away with something. She got away with protecting her child, he said. That's not a crime. That's biology, you're saying. She was justified, so I'm saying. She made the only choice she could live with, and she lived with it. I nodded, and Reeve Wolfe grunted. He disappeared. Perhaps he fled. Perhaps he was silenced. I will not declare what I cannot confirm, but I suspect his fate suited his behavior. That was as close as Wolfe ever got to damning a man without due process, which in this case felt right. I got a letter from Cora, handwritten neat cursive, she said. She had started seeing a therapist, said the memory was coming back in fragments. Wallpaper. It dropped glass, the sound of metal hitting tile. She thanked me. She said the brown stone was smaller than she remembered, but somehow heavier. I think it holds more. Then people know she wrote. I didn't show Wolfe the letter, but I left it on his desk. He didn't mention it the next morning. Fritz made her mother's old recipe, duck à l'orange. No announcement, no conversation, just the smell filling the kitchen like a memory, and Wolfe ate every bite. Here's the thing they never tell you about truth. It doesn't solve, it settles, like dust, like leaves, like an old debt that no longer needs paying. Wolfe didn't clear anyone's name. He didn't condemn anyone either. He did something stranger. He recognized what had been hidden: a knife, a name, a momentum, a kitchen that no longer holds fingerprints but still holds weight. And once he named it, just named it, it stopped being a secret. That's Justice Wolfe style. No drama, no courtroom. Just a man too large for any seat but his own, refusing to let silence when a weak lettera box arrived. No return address. Inside the old cutting board, the original, he took it out, slowly, half expecting a note or a message carved underneath. But there was nothing, just wood familiar. Wait, a faint discoloration in one corner, issued Wolfe. He glanced at it once. Keep it, he said. It remembers better than most people. So I did. I leaned it against the wall of my office, where it sits, now silent, scarred, and absolutely solid. Some mysteries get solved, some get buried, and some get understood. This one, Wolfe understood it, and he made sure that people involved understood what they'd done, what they'd allowed, and what they'd forgotten. That's not justice in the books, but it's justice in the brownstone, and that's good enough for me.